Okay, today's chapter is going to be chapter 6, and we're probably going to do it a little differently than the other ones for a couple of reasons. First of all, the book is really, really good. I already went into all the emotional stuff last time, but they cover a lot of very important issues, and they do it really well. So I'm not really going to reiterate too much of what the book has to say, and you have plenty to study for tomorrow's test. So we're going to go ahead and not try to add too much to that. On the other hand, I do just want to elaborate a little bit on a couple of things instead of adding new things, elaborating on some of the things that the book does say, just so that you understand it a little bit better, and to kind of clear up some of the common misconceptions that people have. Um, Now, the way that this one is done, just like the last chapter, was pretty much all about Piaget. It was a chapter on cognition, and Piaget's theory was all about cognition. Well, Erikson's theory is all about the emotional and social development, and the ways that this emotional and social development helps you kind of solve some moral and ethical problems in your life that you'll then carry over these solutions for the rest of your life. So this is when we really start to get into Erikson in a big way. Um, One of the things that I did want to mention is that you'll notice there's a certain language that we use in psychology, and we use it for a good reason. And when you hear people using language that's not psychological terms, it usually means they just don't know what they're talking about. Truth be told, it kind of removes credibility from them. Like if somebody talks about, life journeys and life paths, this is drastically different than Erikson's stages of moral development. These are just kind of like pop psychology buzzwords, so try to stay away from these, especially when you write your papers, or pretty much any time when you want to, for lack of a better description, sound educated. I mean, they're great religious terms by all means. I even use these terms myself when speaking of things like philosophy or religion, but not psychology because they just don't really fit here. Now, the first of Erikson's stages is trust versus mistrust, and they go over it in the book, and they go over it very well. But one of the things I want you to think about when you're going over it in the book is that this is not just a human thing. If you think back to Harlow's monkey experiments, where there was kind of a critical time in which they could learn affection, this really isn't any different from Erikson's trust versus mistrust thing. Where he figures in the first couple of months, you learn to either trust people or not trust. And this will carry over to how you're going to react for the rest of your life. This is kind of what the monkeys were going through. If they just had the wire mother, if they basically got no affection whatsoever, they learned not to trust anybody. And that carried over to huge impacts in the rest of their lives. Obviously, this was a very extreme form of they developed, zero trust that anything was even another being, as far as everything else was a cold steel wire mother as far as they were concerned. So that level of extreme led to some really extreme results where they just curled up in a corner and bit themselves till they bled. But this is how all of Erikson's theories go. It's not just relatable to humans. Obviously, it's more relatable to other primates than it would be, say a dog or a cat or something like that. But in the book, they also go over some basic emotions that infants have, and I'll mention this because you may or may not have got an introduction to psychology text. I know I go over it, but I'm an emotion guy. That's what I do. There was a researcher who found 6 what they call primary emotions, and these are the emotions that this guy actually went around in like the 50s, 60s, 70s to all the tribes that had not been contacted by civilization, and there are none anymore. He contacted the last ones, and he ran psychology experiments on them, and he would literally show them pictures, and so you get a little picture, and it would have a face on it, and he found that there were 6 faces that anybody of any culture, of any language, they could look at that face and say, this is an emotion, and I know what this emotion is. Um, And so these were called the primary emotions because it's not that these are taught. These are literally hardwired into what we've evolved into. Just being human, you know, if you see somebody smiling, that's happy. And it's not just a smile. There's a look on the face, and the eyes kind of close up a little bit, um, and it's a whole thing. And anybody recognizes that a smile means happy, and then there's an anger face. You can even go to like African totems. That they've, go back hundreds and thousands of years, and these figures are almost always of the six primary emotions. You get the warrior god, and the totem mask that you make of him looks like an angry face, and it's the same angry face in every culture. Um, and when they go in the book, interestingly enough, they go over four different emotions that humans have. They go over happiness, they go over sadness, anger, they go over fear, and these are four of the basic emotions. These primary emotions, and if you've spent any time with a baby, you'll know these are actually the emotions that they give out more often than others. But there's two other primary emotions that they don't mention in the book that they really think they should, because it's so tied into the primary emotions. Because keep in mind, every one of these primary emotions, they're hardwired into us because it is evolutionarily sound to do so. To not only display this emotion, but to be able to read it instinctively without having to learn anything. It's just very natural and fast. So if you see somebody that's angry, we're tribal people. We deal with other people all the time. If you see somebody that's angry, you need to modify your behavior based on that anger. It is very important that you do so. If you see somebody that's happy, well, they are now doing something that is probably quite beneficial to them. If you can do it too, it'll be beneficial to you. Of course, we're going to want to see happiness. Fear. And it's a very clear warning sign, right? I mean, if you see somebody that's fearful, you want to know what to watch out for. You better recognize that fast. And it's the same with sadness. The two other primary emotions, by the way, kind of throw people a little bit, but they're just as evolutionarily sound. The first one is disgust. And that face you make when you bite into a lemon, the whole ew. The ew is actually not cultural, it is universal. And there's a good reason for that. Even if you go back to cavemen, if one caveman sees another caveman bite into something and go, you're not going to bite into it. That could kill you. It is bad for you. Think about all the things we have natural disgust for. Dead bodies, our own feces and waste, filth, basically anything filled with bacteria, disease, vermin, germs. There's a reason we're adapted to want to avoid these things. And the feeling of disgust and the emotion of disgust, which is so prevalent that literally a baby is born and able to show disgust, is so prevalent because we want to learn from other people's mistakes as well as our own, because it keeps us alive. The other one is surprise, which is very easy to figure out why, if you're talking to somebody and suddenly they go, you're going to want to look behind you. You're not going to be, I'm wondering what Bob is trying to say. It's like, no, Bob is trying to say there's a bear right behind you and you better run fast. And if you think about it, surprise and disgust are both things that babies can show as well. They might have different levels of disgust than we do. They're not disgusted by their own feces yet, for example, because they crap all over themselves on a pretty regular basis, so that would not be very evolutionarily sound. That's something we pick up a little bit later. Squishy, soft things, that's what they eat, that's what they deal with all the time. So squishy, soft things are gross to us, but not necessarily disgusting to them. But you'll still see babies make that disgusting face every once in a while. And certainly they make a surprised face all the time. On a very physical development point of view, babies, and again, I'm sure anybody that's been around, especially newborns, will see this. A baby will spend like half the day making a single face. And it's strange because you're like, well, what are they trying to say? Well, they're not trying to say anything. They're trying to exercise their muscles in very important ways. So, they'll spend the whole day doing this. And basically, they're working out their muscles. They're learning how it works. I had my son do this all day. We just took pictures of him. We'd like put something near his mouth because it was funny. We'd take pictures of him, but and they do this because we really need those primary emotions. The emotional development of toddlers is just absolutely essential. But this also means that other emotions aren't there for babies. You know, we have a lot of things that we will see on an adult's face. I mean, all the emotions I'm trying to display now. Um, if you're talking to somebody and they go like, then they're looking quizzical. They're like, what the hell are you talking about? But you never see a baby do that because that is socially ingrained. That is a learned display. It's not one of the primary emotions. But that leads to an interesting question that we obviously can't ever find out because we can't. I mentioned emotion 1, emotion 2, and emotion 3, and we can't ever get that emotion 3 of a baby because they're a little baby. Um, but it makes you wonder whether or not they they're completely feeling these emotions, or if we're only seeing the display. Are we only seeing emotion 2? Are they born with? They're clearly born with emotion 2. Are they born with emotion 3 as well? Are they born with that very subjective feeling of happiness? Like we see a baby laugh, and we're like, "Oh, the baby's laughing. He's having a good time." Maybe he isn't. We're only seeing emotion 2. Maybe he feels nothing yet. Maybe that is just another part of development that's going to come, months and months later on down the road. Uh, and as long as that is, what about the feeling of being quizzical? You know, these are quizzical as in curious, not understanding, a little confused. Babies never have a confused look on their face, which is probably for the best because they don't know anything. They look confused all the time. But is being confused, while that's an emotion that we wear on our faces, that's something that we're taught as well. We're clearly taught the display of it, um, and exactly how to portray this. It's portrayed a little bit differently in every culture, um, but the feeling itself might also be taught. And we're not sure because as scientists, we can only know what we can measure, and we can't measure the subjective experience of babies. It'll just never happen. Um, Two more things I want to go over real fast here. Again, just elaborations on things that are in the book. I'm not really adding a lot new to the book today. Um, they go over attachment. And it's a big section on the book. I'm sure there'll be a section on the quiz on it. So you have everything on attachment. So you have you're securely attached and insecurely attached. One of the problems that we got is we couldn't figure out for the longest time what caused somebody to be securely attached or insecurely attached. And there's a few different types of insecure attachments. There's insecure, anxious, ambivalent, avoidant, that sort of thing. And you'll read about them all in the book if you don't remember them from Intro to Psych. And for the longest time, we thought that secure was the best. So therefore, good parents had secure children because they did something right, and bad parents had, say, avoidant children because they kind of messed up. They didn't raise the kid that right, so they're not going to have children that are all that attached to them. Basically, the kids don't like them because they suck as parents. That was kind of what we thought. But first of all, that's kind of our own arrogance as a country. Once we started doing some cross-cultural analyses, we found out that while in America we love secure children, they don't like secure children in other countries. In Germany, the preferred child is actually anxious ambivalent, which we see as like random and chaotic and almost a crazy little kid. But they see that's actually their preferred. Secure is just too clingy for them. In Japan and a lot of the Asian countries, they prefer avoidant children. They prefer children that keep to themselves, that aren't particularly interested in their parents in any way. They basically shut up and do what they're told, and this is their cultural ideal. So there goes the idea that secure is the best one to be, and then the idea that you get that if you mess up, you get an insecure child. Turns out that isn't accurate either. And I say this because if you're not a parent now, chances are you probably will be at some point. And attachment is one of those kind of key things in rearing your children. And it turns out the thing that actually makes a secure child isn't that you're a good parent, but that you're a good match of a parent. Everybody has different parenting styles. We have different things that we do, different things that we don't do. This isn't a parenting class, so we're not actually going to get into advice on how to parent your kid better or better or worse. By all means, if you have any questions, go ahead and email me. I've studied a lot about this myself, but typically, if you have a kid who's not securely attached, it is simply because the way you rear the child is just not what they're into. This is why you'll get two people with two kids, one kid's secure and one's not. I mean, I honestly, just me, I have a secure child and I have an insecure child. She's anxious ambivalent. She's described as very clingy by people. And this is just because, as a personality style, just one of these inborn hereditary things, having nothing to do with how I raise her, because obviously I raise her just like I did my son, she simply has a much greater need for physical contact, for affiliation, for that familial bond, and I'm too distant of a father for what she would really prefer. Now, for my son, it's perfect. You know, he's very independent. He likes time to himself. You know, he loves the fact that we don't have a family meal most days. People just get what they want to eat. He gets to make his own decisions. He gets to learn how to cook for himself. He loves this sort of stuff. My daughter, on the other hand, kind of wants to be babied and taken care of. And this is just her personality. And it clashes with mine, so she's not securely attached. Same child being just babied and smothered all the time would probably wind up very securely attached. May have other drawbacks as well, but secure attachment would most likely be there in addition. A very last thing that I want to go over, like I said, a little faster than some of the other ones, some of the other lectures, is in kind of the end it goes over self-awareness. This is just one of the things that babies start to learn at the end of toddlerhood, kind of who they are and what they are. And the whole point of self-awareness, I'm not sure how well they define it in the book. 'Cause there's a lot of self things when you get into psychology. You have your self-concept. That's who you think you are, and self-awareness is how well you can see yourself objectively. From a third-person point of view, without any of your own personal biases, and everybody thinks they're awesome. But how well you can see yourself, from a completely third-person point of view. And children start to get this at the end of toddlerhood, but they're not very good at it. And the key here is that most adults aren't very good at it either. It's ironic because self-awareness is the one thing you can never judge for yourself. If you ask people, there are certain things that are kind of amusing in psychology when you ask people. So if you ask people, think about it for yourself. And actually ask people around. If you have anybody they talk to on a regular basis, just ask them. Ask, are you more healthy than average? 98% of people say yes. This was at a college campus, admittedly, so if you ask older people, it might be a slightly different demographic. 98% of people think they're above average as far as healthiness goes. Now, obviously, statistically, 50% of the people are above average. That's what average is all about. But everybody thinks that they're above average in health. And we'll rationalize our own little reasons for it. It's interesting. I had a roommate who was obese. She was about 100 pounds overweight. And I asked her, I'm like, are you healthier than average? She's like, yeah. Well, why is that? He's like, well, I don't have any diseases. I'm young. I'm only about 24. And she had all these. I'm not diabetic. Had all these things. And then I asked my fiance the same question, and she's like, well, I'm not obese. I have. She didn't even mention that she works out and she can beat me arm wrestling. She's just an incredibly strong individual. She's a very healthy individual, but her rationalization had the same level of awful self-awareness that all the rest of our rationalizations do. She was just talking about the fact that she wasn't obese, which admittedly she's not. But self-awareness is a very similar thing. Nobody has, if you ask anybody whether or not they're self-aware, they're going to tell you that they are. How well do you really know yourself? Almost everybody will say, I know myself really well. So even though kids aren't that good at it, don't worry, adults aren't that good at it either. So all right, ask me any questions, and the test is tomorrow. Good luck.